Tom Messick disappeared November 15th, 2015. Horicon, Warren County, Lake George Wild Forest, New York. His body was never located. In the fall of 2015, Thomas Messick Sr., age 82, walked into the woods south of Brant Lake to hunt and was never seen again. Messick lived in Troy and was out that Sunday with a group of 6 friends and family members who were hunting near Lily Pond in an area of state land that is part of the Lake George Wild Forest. The older members of the group, 4 of them, were watchers in a static position sat on a log or similar comfortable spot and were in a near vertical line, while the younger hunters used the path around the lake to drive the deer to the watchers as part of the drive. Since the mid-1880s, Brant Lake has been a popular fishing and hunting area among wealthy visitors, including Theodore Roosevelt. Tom was supposed to stay in one spot as members of the group walked through the woods to push deer toward him, but when they arrived at the location where he was supposed to be, he was gone, without a trace of him or his belongings. No sign of any deer were found that day. He was wearing duck boots, camouflage pants and coat, gloves, and a red and black checkered hat that he had worn for decades. He carried a rifle and a walkie-talkie. Tom served in the U.S. Army as a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division, was 5 feet 10 inches tall, and weighed approximately 160 pounds. He was an experienced hunter and woodsman and taught hunter and survival training for many years. He had a history of heart problems and lost an eye in an accident with an explosive device in his early 20s. So he had poor vision and limited hearing, as well as 159 stitches in his hand. He had also just gotten over a case of shingles and nearly decided not to go on the annual hunting trip. After 55 years of hunting with longtime friends, also senior men, at the Messick's hunting camp in Hague, they decided to try a Horicon property for the first time. Messick and the other hunters planned to meet up again after a couple of hours. He was last seen at 10 a.m., and when Messick did not show up at the agreed-upon time, his friends called forest rangers and they searched from 4:30 p.m. It got dark around 7 p.m., and at that point, half the group stayed and fired their rifles and honked the car horns to attract Tom to the area. The rest of the men left the scene and reported him missing to family and the authorities. On November 16th, the search started with 13 trained SAR professionals from the Park Service. It was well organized from the start, and it had started quickly, following the time that Tom went missing. A huge search over several weeks, involving more than 300 professionals and volunteers on some days, assisted by dogs, divers, and several helicopters, found no clues, including no sign of his rifle. More than 4 square miles were searched, with a larger area being searched by air with the aid of a helicopter from the State Police Aviation Unit. More than 15 agencies were involved, including DEC Forest Rangers, DEC Police Canine Unit, DEC Police Officers, FBI Quick Response Team, a State Police Special Operations Response Team, the Warren County Sheriff's Office Tactical Team, and volunteers from the New York State Federation of Search and Rescue Teams. The weather was poor with heavy rain, but sniffer dogs were deployed before the worst of the rain arrived. Searchers walked through the woods, no matter how thick they were, including swamps, and checked nearby roads, but there was absolutely nothing. Areas were tied off with string to box off specific area to allow a detailed search of every grid zone. It was described as a spider's web of string in the forest. Given his age, searchers were baffled as he could not have got far from his original location, and some said it was weird that there were no sounds of wildlife. The search area has many caves, crevices, and other hazards. The FBI arrived on the fourth day, November 19th. This was unusual as the FBI never got involved in these type of searches. Investigators have said there have been no indication of foul play. David Winchell, a spokesman for the DEC, said rangers continue to search the area on a limited, continuous basis since a wide-scale ground search ended in January of 2016. That means rangers check the area periodically for evidence or clues. The investigation into Messick's disappearance is still classified as an active missing person case by authorities. Tom's wife Beverly said the FBI told me something isn't right with his case, but they don't know what. They won't share any theories if they have them. The FBI said until they make a discovery, they're never going to know. He'd been in the woods since he was a boy, and if he got lost, he would have cut a piece of his jacket and tied it to a tree, and done other things he learned. His wife said her greatest fear was that he was the victim of foul play. The only thing I can think of is that maybe someone came by in a quad, heard him, got scared and drove him out of there. I keep praying they'll find him so we have some closure. I keep worrying that I didn't tell him I loved him the last day I saw him alive. In the summer of 2018, state police used sniffer dogs trained to detect cadavers to go through portions of the woods and fields near where Messick disappeared. State police investigator John Dayett said no clues were found, but the police investigation was ongoing. In the movie Missing 411 Hunted, one of the group was interviewed. I heard a strange noise in the woods, but I don't know what it was. Just a different noise from what I usually hear, you know? Like what? It'd be hard to explain but it was different. Something different than I never heard before in the woods. I just can't say what it was, you know? How long in duration was it? Was it 2 or 3 seconds? No, it's just whatever it is, you know? How far away was it? I'd say it was probably 150 yards, something like that. Was it toward Tom or away from Tom? This was up towards the hill. The top of the hill, yeah. Did you tell the cops this? Yeah, I told them that, but they just passed it off, you know. Tom's disappearance is yet another really strange case. He was old, but an experienced backwoodsman, a tough guy and not one to wander off into the woods when on a hunt. He had a rifle and a walkie-talkie, and no sign of them has been found despite a massive search of the area, including all the inaccessible parts, including water and caves. So big a search that locals thought someone important like a politician was involved. Sniffer dogs nor FLIR-equipped helicopters were able to find any trace. Was he snatched from Lake George Wild Forest by a serial killer? Or something else? Why was the FBI involved on this case? It was like Tom just vanished off the face of the planet. On October 18th, 1984, 3.5-year-old Laura Bradbury was on a camping trip with her family at the Indian Cove Campground in the Joshua Tree National Park in California. They were a family of 5, cramped into a 2-bedroom condominium, so Joshua Tree offered a break. They were regular visitors with parents Patty and Michael. She went with her 8-year-old brother Travis to the portable restrooms near the campground and left Laura outside while he used the facilities. When he came out, Laura had vanished. Over 250 people, along with horses, dogs, and helicopters, searched for Laura in the Joshua Tree National Park. A dog followed her scent for about 2 miles before losing it. After only 3 days, the official search was called off. The Bradbury family mobilized their own massive effort, distributing millions of flyers and T-shirts with Laura's likeness on them. They also appeared on radio and television talk shows, and the disappearance was reenacted twice on national television. A hotline was established, to gather tips and field inquiries. The search for her became a national story, and Laura was one of the first missing children to be featured on milk cartons. Witnesses claim to have seen a man in his 50s with a metallic blue van at Indian Cove Campground just before Laura disappeared, and a similar-looking man was seen near Burns Canyon a few hours later. The sheriff's department even brought in a hypnotist to try to coax out more details from campers who had seen the bearded, pot-bellied man in his van. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department had investigated Laura's disappearance, but Mike had lost faith in the deputies, and he had mounted his own search. Mike grew increasingly contemptuous of sheriff's deputies for not doing enough about the many tips that flowed into the Laura Center. They were incompetent or lazy or both, he told reporters. He even speculated that someone inside the department knew that a kidnapper was involved and was covering it up. Mike heard the story of Clifford LaVille and Toby Santangelo, who were said to have told deputies they had solid information about a man they believed kidnapped Laura. But investigators checked it out and found it not credible. Not long afterward, LaVille and Santangelo were found shot to death. Along with a private investigator, he combed the isolated communities near Joshua Tree, known for attracting drug dealers and oddballs. His hunt, too, came to nothing. In 1986, a skull believed to be that of Laura Bradbury was found by hikers near the park's west entrance, only 2 miles from the family's campsite. Some reports say 5 miles. However, DNA tests were unable to conclusively prove that the skull was Laura's, not even blood type or gender, and the only certainty was that it was a child. A sheriff's captain publicly speculated it was Laura's and had a theory. Maybe, he said, she meandered away from the toilet, stumbled, and was somehow buried by collapsing sand. Only recently, he continued, coyotes or a mountain lion had dug up all that was left. In 1990, new DNA tests were said to prove the skull was Laura's with 99% likelihood of a match. Laura's mother, Patty, died in 2001, and her father, Michael, wrote a book about his daughter's disappearance called Laura Ann Bradbury, A Father's Search, in 2010. Michael Bradbury has been trying to have the skull transferred from the coroner's facility to a mortuary since October 2009, but because the San Bernardino County Coroner's Office has not issued a death certificate, he has been unable to claim his daughter's remains. In a 2010 interview, he said he was shown about 40 color 35mm slides of the skull and was astonished to find out it is a full-size skull, about 7 inches by 5 inches, missing the teeth and lower jaw. He claimed that the investigator showed him a much different skull shortly after hikers discovered the remains. My wife and I were shown a smaller 3-inch skull cap in or around 1986 or 87 that the sheriffs claimed was Laura's skull, he said. The two skulls are totally dissimilar. They look nothing like each other. I wonder now what or whose skull they showed me then, and why. He also had a report on tests that provided inconclusive results on whether the cranium was his daughter's. According to the report, only 1 of 4 DNA tests performed on the skull matched DNA samples from Laura's mother's blood. Even hair taken from Laura's hairbrush did not match DNA with the skull, he said. The 2 partial skull bones are the only remains Michael was aware of that are believed to be from his daughter. I am very anxious to put closure to this terrible period of my life, Bradbury said. All I want is justice for my daughter. That's all I care about. No arrests have ever been made, and the case remains unsolved.